Have you ever wondered what lies on the other side of an unopened door? A piece of paper, a signature, a legacy that can change your life or ruin it. Imagine riding through the desert wilderness, the sun beating down on your back, and in front of you is a house you've inherited. But no one tells you it hides a secret that will stop your heart. That's the story of Nathan Caldwell, an ordinary man, standing on the threshold of a mystery far greater than he could have imagined. Nathan, a former bounty hunter in his 32nd, isn't the type to dream of adventure. He likes the simple things: a cup of black coffee in the morning, the steady thud of horse hooves on dry land, and the peace of an undisturbed life. But when he receives a letter from a Tucson lawyer informing him that his estranged uncle, Ezra Caldwell, has left him a small house deep in the Arizona desert, everything changes. Ezra is an uncle Nathan met only a few times as a child, an eccentric old man who likes to tell tales of cursed gold mines and ghost towns. Nathan doesn't think much of him until the letter arrives, accompanied by a land title stamped with the official seal of the county clerk. The house, the lawyer said, had been abandoned since Ezra died 5 years ago. No one lived there. No one cared for it. Just an old log pile in the middle of the desert, a few acres of barren land, and a dry well. Nathan had no intention of keeping it. He planned to sell it, take the money, and continue his wandering life. But as he rode his horse through the red hills of Arizona toward the house, he realized something was wrong. In the distance, a thin wisp of smoke rose from a chimney. In the bright sunlight, he could see the outlines of 4 horses grazing in a small field where there should have been bushes and cacti. Nathan stopped his horse, his hand instinctively reaching for the pistol at his side. He wasn't one to panic, but his heart quickened as he realized the house wasn't abandoned. Someone was living there. Someone had made it their home. He dismounted, his heavy boots crunching on the dry, cracked earth, and headed toward the house. Through the dusty windows, he saw the flickering of an oil lamp, shadows moving inside. Laughter, a woman's voice, soft but clear, reverberated through the hot air, accompanied by the clanking of dishes and the scraping of wooden chairs across the floor. He stood at the door, took a deep breath, and knocked. The knock was dry, a challenge to the silence of the desert. When the door opened, Nathan felt the air sucked from his chest. Standing before him was a woman so beautiful that he forgot what he'd been about to say. Her hair was jet black, shoulder length. Her eyes were the gray of the sky before a storm, and her gaze was both curious and wary. She was tall, with a graceful figure, as if she belonged somewhere more luxurious than this desert cabin. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice low and clear, carrying a hint of challenge that made Nathan feel like he had something to prove. "I'm Nathan Caldwell," he replied, trying to keep his voice, even though his hands were shaking slightly as he held the certificate. "This is my house. My uncle, Ezra Caldwell, left it to me." The woman didn't look at the paper. Instead, she tilted her head, her eyes sharp as if she were reading his every thought. Behind her, 4 other women appeared, each beautiful in her own way, but each with a strange attraction. A girl with shining blonde hair, soft blue eyes, stood behind the doorframe. A woman with brown hair, sharp eyes, stood in the shadows, as if she were observing everything from a hidden corner. A girl with fiery red hair, with a tough look, crossed her arms, ready to argue. And a final woman, chestnut hair, exuding calm but authoritative, stood near the fireplace. The woman at the door smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. "I am Evelyn," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Come inside, Mr. Caldwell. We need to talk." Nathan stepped inside, feeling as if he were entering another world. Inside, the house was nothing like he remembered from his Uncle Ezra's stories. Silk curtains hung in the windows, the furniture was polished, and the scent of sage and burnt wood hung in the air. These women had made this a home, not a temporary shelter. He could feel their presence not just taking up space, but a deep attachment to the house. The redhead stepped forward, her eyes glittering with defiance. "I'm Lila Monroe," she said, her voice sharp. "And before you start claiming ownership, you should know that we have a right to be here." Nathan frowned, holding up the certificate. "What rights? This is my property." The lawyer made it clear that no one is here. The blonde girl, her voice soft as the desert wind, stepped forward. "I'm Hannah Wells. We don't want to cause trouble, Mr. Caldwell." "Really?" Her eyes were sincere, and Nathan felt a little guilty for doubting them. The woman in the shadows stepped into the light, her eyes sharp as knives. "Isabel Crane," she introduced herself briefly, without further explanation. The last woman, standing near the fireplace, spoke in a deep voice. "I am Nora Bennett. We have been expecting you, Mr. Caldwell, though perhaps not so soon." Nathan looked around, feeling 5 pairs of eyes on him. They weren't just beautiful, they radiated intelligence, determination, and something deeper, as if they were hiding a secret he wasn't ready to discover. Evelyn stepped closer, close enough for him to catch a whiff of her light perfume, lavender, and desert sun. "It's not about whether you own this house, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice low but clear. "It's about whether you can handle what comes with it." She paused, her gray eyes locked on him, and her smile was both inviting and challenging. "Can you face all 5 of us?" The question hung in the air, a challenge Nathan didn't fully understand. But he knew, even then, that his life would never be the same. These women were more than squatters. They were part of something bigger, and Nathan, whether he wanted to or not, was caught in the middle of it. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss the next part. We're taking you deeper into the desert, where dark secrets await. Hit the bell to get notifications. And if you want to support us, consider leaving a super chat. Nathan's story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. As Nathan entered the house, he felt as if he were entering a world he did not belong to. The light from the oil lamps hanging on the walls cast shimmering shadows, as if the house was telling a story he was not allowed to hear. Evelyn led him to an old but carefully polished oak table, where 5 women stood, each with their own energy, but all with one thing in common: wariness. They did not see him as an intruder, but they did not welcome him as a guest. They were assessing him, and Nathan knew it. He sat down, still clutching the deed in his hand, as if it were his only shield against the uncertainty of the moment. "I don't understand," he said, his voice shaking but trying to keep it firm. "The lawyer says this house belongs to me. No one lives here. So what are you doing here? And what rights are you talking about?" Lila, the redhead, crossed her arms and leaned forward, her eyes piercing him. "You think we just happened to show up here, taking over your uncle's place for fun?" Her voice was sharp, but there was a hint of hurt in it. "We're here because your Uncle Ezra gave us this place. He didn't just leave you the house, Mr. Caldwell." Nathan frowned, feeling as if the ground beneath him had fallen away. "What do you mean?" "I have the paperwork." He held up the paper, but neither of them looked at it. Instead, Nora, a chestnut-haired woman with a calm demeanor, stepped forward and placed another piece of paper on the table. It was old, the edges yellowed, but the signature on it, Ezra Caldwell's, was clear and unmistakable. "Here's the contract," Nora said, her voice low and steady. "Signed 3 months before your uncle died. He allowed us to live here in exchange for taking care of the house and the land around it." Nathan picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the handwriting. The contract was detailed, legal, and notarized by a notary in a nearby town. It stated that the 5 women, Evelyn, Lila, Hannah, Isabel, and Nora, were allowed to stay until their circumstances changed. But it wasn't the contract that sent a chill down Nathan's spine, but the final sentence: "They are allowed to stay to protect Ezra Caldwell's secret." "Secret?" Nathan looked up, staring at Evelyn. "What secret?" "My uncle is an old loner who likes to tell ghost stories and drink whiskey. He's not the type to keep big secrets." Evelyn smiled, but this time there was something sad about her smile. "You don't know your uncle as well as you think, Nathan. Ezra was more than a storyteller. He was a protector of us, and of something much bigger." Before Nathan could ask further, Isabel, a woman with sharp eyes, spoke from the corner of the room. "We're not here just to live. We're here because we have nowhere else to go. And if you're going to kick us out, you know it won't be easy." Nathan felt a jolt of electricity run through him. Not because of Isabel's threat, though it would have been enough to make anyone flinch, but because of the way Evelyn looked at him, as if she were searching for something in him, a part of him he had never known. "I'm not trying to fire anyone," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "But I need to understand what's going on. If you have any authority here, why aren't the lawyers saying anything? And why are you talking about my uncle's secret?" Hannah, the blonde, stepped closer, her hands clasped together as if trying to contain her emotions. "Ezra was a good man, Mr. Caldwell. He gave us a chance to start over, to escape things we couldn't face elsewhere. Her voice trembled, and Nathan felt a sudden urge to comfort her, though he didn't know why. Lila cut in, her tone harsh. "Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be, Hannah. He needs to know the truth, at least part of it." She turned to Nathan, her eyes burning. "Your uncle saved us from a man named Victor Slade. He was a powerful man in Tucson, a man who controlled everything, land and people, through money and intimidation. We were the ones who stood up to him. And Ezra gave us this place to hide." Nathan felt his stomach tighten. Victor Slade. The name was familiar to him. In his years as a bounty hunter, he'd heard rumors of Slade, a rich, ruthless man with a hand that reached even the sheriffs and judges of Arizona. But he'd never thought of Slade as related to his uncle. "Wait," Nathan said, holding up his hands. "You're saying my uncle Ezra took on Victor Slade to protect you? Why would he do that?" Nora exchanged glances with Evelyn before answering. "Because Ezra owes us. Not money, but a debt from long ago. He did the right thing by letting us stay here. And we kept our promise to him to take care of this place and keep his secret safe." Nathan felt his head spin. What secret? What debt? He looked around the room, from Lila's defiant face to Hannah's soft eyes, from Isabel's calculating gaze to Nora's calm, and finally at Evelyn, who seemed to hold the key to all his questions. "So what is the secret?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "If I own this place, I have a right to know. I'm sick." Evelyn stepped closer, close enough for him to feel the warmth of her body. "That secret is not something you can tell in a morning, Nathan. It is something you must earn by proving yourself worthy." She paused, her gray eyes glinting in the lamplight. "And if you want to stay here, you will have to face what we face, including Victor Slade." Before Nathan could answer, there was a distant sound. Horses, many horses, coming down the valley. Lila ran to the window, pulled the curtains aside, and looked out. Her face paled, and when she turned back, her voice was low, almost a whisper. "He found us." The room fell silent, save for Nathan's heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know who Victor Slade was, or what secrets these women were hiding, but he knew one thing for sure. The peaceful life he'd dreamed of was gone forever. And as Evelyn took his hand, her eyes filled with fear and determination, he realized he'd stepped into a story he couldn't turn back from. Find out what happens next, as Nathan confronts the darkness from these women's pasts and his own. The sound of hooves drew closer, like a drumbeat signaling an approaching storm. Nathan felt the air in the house grow heavy, as if the desert outside itself were holding its breath. Evelyn held his hand, her fingers tightening, not out of fear, but as a reminder that he had become part of something larger than himself. Lila stood by the window, her body as taut as a bowstring, her blue eyes flashing with anger and determination. "Slade's men," she said, her voice low but sharp. "3. There may be more behind." Nathan walked to the window, ignoring Evelyn's warning glance. Through the dusty glass, he saw 3 men on horseback emerge from the foot of the hill. They wore black cloaks, wide-brimmed hats that obscured their faces, but the way they moved, confident, almost arrogant, said they had not come to negotiate. One, clearly the leader, stopped his horse near the fence, his cold gaze sweeping the house. Nathan recognized him instantly. It was Victor Slade. He had heard of Slade in the taverns of Tucson, where stories were whispered over whiskey. A wealthy man with copper mines in the South and connections to the most powerful men in the land. But it wasn't his money that scared people. It was his ruthlessness. Those who dared to oppose Slade often disappeared, leaving behind deserted towns and broken families. "Victor Slade," Nathan said, turning back to Evelyn. "What does he want from you?" Evelyn exchanged glances with Nora before answering. "He wants us," she said, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that made Nathan shiver. "He thinks we belong to him, like a person can be owned on a piece of paper." Nathan frowned. "Paper? You mean the contract?" Isabel, still standing in the corner, stepped into the light, holding a neatly bound document in her hand. "Not exactly a contract," she said, her voice cold. "He called them agreements, but they were signed under threat, under false promises, and under the dangers he created. He destroyed our lives, one by one, and forced us to sign to become his property." Nathan felt his blood boil. He'd seen plenty of injustices in his years as a bounty hunter, but the idea of a man who treated women like commodities made him want to grip his gun. "And my uncle?" he asked. What did Ezra do to make Slade his enemy? Nora spoke up, her voice low and clear. Ezra found out the truth about Slade. He worked for him years ago, when Slade was just starting to build his empire. But when Ezra learned what Slade was doing, using women to consolidate his power, forcing them into unfair contracts, he turned against him. Ezra helped us escape, and he left this place as a safe haven. Nathan shook his head, trying to process the information. But why didn't he tell me? If he knew all this, why didn't he leave a letter, an explanation? Hannah, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly. Because he knew you would come here, Nathan. He trusted you to do the right thing, even if you didn't know the whole story. Ezra said you had his heart, even if you didn't realize it. Before Nathan could reply, there was a knock on the door, 3 loud, decisive knocks, as if whoever was outside knew exactly who they were dealing with. The room fell silent, save for the desert wind whistling through the cracks in the door. Lila turned, her eyes burning. He didn't come alone, she whispered. He never does. Evelyn grabbed Nathan's arm and pulled him away from the window. Don't let them see you, she said, her voice urgent. If Slade knows you're here, things will get a lot more complicated. Nathan wanted to ask why, but Evelyn's eyes, a mixture of fear and determination, silenced him. He let her pull him behind him, near the fireplace, where Nora was quietly gathering some papers and stuffing them into a wooden box. Isabel stood near the door, her hand hovering near a dagger hidden in her coat. Hannah, though frightened, stood straight, as if trying to keep her courage. The knock came again, this time accompanied by a voice deep, smooth, but cold as a knife. I know you're in there, the voice said, and Nathan felt his heart beat faster. Open the door, or I will. Evelyn took a deep breath, then walked toward the door. Before she opened it, she turned to Nathan, her eyes telling him he still had a chance to leave, to stay out of this trouble. But Nathan didn't move. There was something about the way these women stood up to their fears, the way they protected each other, that made him feel he couldn't turn away. When Evelyn opened the door, Victor Slade stood there, tall, with black hair streaked with silver and eyes as pale as ice. He smiled, but there was no warmth in his smile. Evelyn, he said, his voice sweet but menacing. It's been a while, hasn't it? I thought you'd forgotten me, but I never forget what's mine. Nathan felt anger rising in his chest. He was talking about these women as if they were objects, not people. Lila stepped forward, standing beside Evelyn, her eyes blazing. We don't belong to you, Slade, she said, her voice as sharp as a knife, and we're never coming back. Slade laughed, a dry, mirthless laugh. You seem very confident, Miss Monroe. But you forget that I have the law on my side. Those contracts are valid, signed by you, and I am here to make sure you honor them. Now, Nathan could no longer keep silent. He stepped out of the shadows and stood in front of Slade, between him and the women. I am Nathan Caldwell, he said, his voice firm. This is my property, and you are trespassing. I suggest you leave now. Slade looked at Nathan, his eyes flashing with curiosity and contempt. So you're Ezra's heir, he said, his voice low. I've heard of you. The bounty hunter, yes? You think you can take me on for a piece of paper and a gun? Nathan felt his hand tighten around the hilt of his gun. He didn't want violence, but he knew men like Slade, men who understood only the language of power and strength. I don't want trouble, Nathan said, but if you don't leave, you'll see I'm more than a piece of paper. The tension in the air was tense, like strings drawn to the limit. 2 of Slade's men, still mounted, reached for their guns. But before either could make a move, Nora stepped forward, holding a small metal box in her hand. Slade, she said, her voice calm but sharp. Do you want us to reveal what's in this? Because if you force us, all of Tucson will know the truth about you. Slade's face hardened, but only for a moment. He smiled, but the smile did not hide his unease. You think you're so smart, don't you? He said, but you forget that I didn't come here alone, and I don't leave without what I want. Oh. Another hoofbeat sounded in the distance, and Nathan felt his stomach tighten. Slade hadn't lied, he hadn't come alone, and as new figures emerged from the valley, Nathan knew things were about to get much worse. Stay tuned to discover the secret in Nora's box and whether Nathan can protect these women from the approaching darkness. The sound of hooves from the valley grew closer, like the heartbeat of the desert, pounding and unforgiving. Nathan stood in the cabin, feeling the air thicken around him. Victor Slade's eyes, cold and calculating, remained fixed on the metal box in Nora's hands. He said nothing, but Nathan could see the tension in the way Slade gripped the reins, as if he were trying to contain a storm of anger inside. "You should leave, Slade," Evelyn said, her voice calm but sharp, like a knife hidden under velvet. "We have proof, and you know it. If you force us, all of Tucson will know the truth about what you did." Slade laughed, but his laugh was dry, like desert wind blowing through bone. "Proof?" he repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think a few pieces of paper will bring me down? I own half this land, and the rest owe me. You don't stand a chance." "Oh." Nathan stepped forward, placing himself between Slade and the women. He didn't know the whole story, but he knew enough to realize that Slade was more than just a bully. He was a predator, and these women were prey he had been chasing for far too long. "I told you," Nathan repeated, his voice hard. "This is my land. You're trespassing. Leave, or I'll make you regret it." Slade tilted his head, his eyes sweeping Nathan as if he were evaluating a horse before buying it. "You have courage, Caldwell," he said. "But courage is not enough to survive here. These women belong to me, and I will take them back, whether you stand there or not." Before Nathan could reply, Nora opened the metal box and pulled out a sheaf of neatly folded papers. She held them up, the light from the windows illuminating the handwriting. "These are more than papers, Slade," she said, her voice calm but with the weight of a verdict. "These are testimonies from people you destroyed, women you forced into contracts, families you threatened, and witnesses you thought were silenced forever." Slade's face hardened, but only for a moment. He quickly regained his composure, but Nathan saw a flicker of uncertainty in his pale blue eyes. "Confession?" Slade sneered. "Who do you think is going to believe that lie? A bunch of women running from their responsibilities? I have the judge, the sheriff, and my attorney on my side." "Oh." Isabel, still standing in the corner, stepped forward, her eyes as sharp as knives. "But you don't have Margaret," she said, her voice low and menacing. "Your wife, who you claim died of tuberculosis 5 years ago. She's alive, Slade, and she told us everything." Margaret's name made Slade freeze. Nathan felt his hand tremble, if only for a moment. "Margaret?" Slade repeated, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "You're lying. She's dead. I buried her." Hannah, who had been silent all along, stepped forward, her blue eyes shining with determination. "No, Slade. Margaret is alive. She's in Denver, and she gave us this." She pulled a small silver heart-shaped badge from her pocket, which glinted in the light. "She said you took it from her after you faked her death to take over her father's mining rights." Nathan looked at the badge, feeling anger rise inside him. He didn't know who Margaret was, but the thought of Slade going so far as to fake his own wife's death made him want to lunge forward and punch him in the face. He held back, feeling Evelyn's gentle hand on his shoulder, a reminder that this was not the time to act on emotion. "Margaret is alive," Nora continued, her voice unwavering, "and she's contacted the federal marshals. They're on their way here, Slade. They know about your fake contracts, about the women you made disappear, and about the money you stole from the copper mines." Slade stood there, motionless, but Nathan could see panic creeping into his eyes. He looked out across the valley, where new figures were emerging, not his own, but horsemen bearing the insignia of federal marshals. Their hooves echoed, a warning that Slade's time was running out. But Slade was not one to give up. He turned, his eyes flashing with the desperation of a cornered animal. "You think you won?" he roared, his hand moving to the gun at his side. "If I can't have you, no one can." Time seemed to slow down. Nathan acted on instinct, pushing Evelyn behind him and pulling the pistol from his belt. But before either of them could pull the trigger, Lila lunged forward, quick as a desert wind, and plunged a dagger into Slade's gun arm. He roared in pain. The gun fell to the ground, and blood began to seep through his jacket. "Don't move," Lila said, her voice cold but trembling with adrenaline. "Next time, the knife won't stop at your arm." Two of Slade's men, still mounted, drew their guns, but stopped abruptly as the sound of rifle fire rang out from the valley. A bullet grazed one of their heads, and Nathan saw the federal deputies, weapons ready, approaching. Slade, clutching his wounded arm, looked around, realizing he was surrounded. "Consider yourself lucky this time," Slade growled, but his confidence had evaporated. But this isn't the end. I'll be back, and when I am, no sheriff will save you." Nathan stepped forward, standing opposite Slade, his eyes unwavering. "If you turn around," he said, his voice low and firm, "you will face me. And I am not Ezra. I do not leave out second chances." End of quote. Slade looked at him, eyes full of hatred, but he said nothing more. The deputies stepped forward, handcuffed Slade and his 2 men, and led them away in tense silence. As the sound of their hooves faded, Nathan felt the air in the house lighten, but he knew the danger was not yet truly over. Evelyn turned to him, her gray eyes shining with gratitude and something deeper. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "You could have left us to deal with it." Ugh. Nathan shook his head, feeling his heart pounding harder as he looked at her. "I'm not the type to turn away," he said. "Not when I see what's going on here." Nora set the metal box down on the table, her eyes softening. "You're more like Ezra than you think, Nathan. He stood up for us, too, even though it could cost him his life." Nathan wanted to ask more, to understand more about his uncle, about these women, and about the secret they were protecting. But before he could open his mouth, Hannah, her voice trembling, spoke. "We need to tell him the truth, the whole truth. If he's going to stay, he needs to know." The 4 remaining women exchanged glances, as if considering a decision that would change everything. Finally, Evelyn nodded. "Okay," she said, "but not here. Not now. There is a place we need to take you, the place where Ezra kept his secret." Nathan felt a rush of adrenaline rush through him. Ezra's secret. A hidden place. Where was this story leading him? And as he looked into Evelyn's eyes, he knew that whatever awaited him, it would change his life forever. Let's find out where Evelyn will take Nathan, and what secrets are hidden in this vast desert. The next day, as the sun rose over the red hills, Nathan stood before the cabin, feeling as if he had just emerged from a strange dream. The confrontation with Victor Slade still haunted him, the gunshots, the blood seeping through Slade's jacket, the hateful look in his eyes as he was led away. But more than that, he couldn't stop thinking about these women, Evelyn, Lila, Hannah, Isabel, and Nora, and the secret they were hiding. They weren't just shelters, they were fighters, survivors, and they were pulling him into a story he wasn't ready to understand. Evelyn emerged from the house, wearing an old leather jacket, her dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. She carried a lantern and a coil of rope, her eyes both determined and anxious. "Are you ready, Nathan?" she asked, her voice soft but with the weight of an irresistible invitation. "Ready for what?" Nathan asked, though he knew the answer wouldn't be simple. "You said you wanted to take me somewhere. Where?" Lila, who was saddling a horse nearby, turned and sneered. "You will see, Caldwell. But I warn you, what you are about to learn will make you see everything differently, including your uncle." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine, but he nodded. "Lead the way." The 5 women, along with Nathan, rode out of the estate toward a low ridge of rocky mountains to the west. The desert spread out before them, hot and unforgiving, but also starkly beautiful, with red rocks and cactus stand silently in the sun. They rode in silence, the only sound being the hooves and the wind whistling through the rocks. Nathan noticed how they moved as a team, each knowing her role. Evelyn led the way, her eyes focused on the road. Lila trailed behind, ever alert, her hand never leaving her rifle. Hannah and Nora flanked Nathan, as if protecting him, and Isabel, her eyes sharp, watched everything like a hawk. After nearly an hour, they stopped before a narrow ravine, barely hidden by large boulders. Evelyn dismounted, signaling for the others to follow. "This is the place," she said, her voice low but clear. "Be careful. The path is not easy." Nathan looked at the ravine, feeling a twinge of unease creeping in. It looked like a forgotten entrance, one where the desert swallowed up anything that dared to enter. But he had no time to hesitate. Evelyn lit the lantern, its dim light illuminating the rugged stone walls, and she led the way into the darkness. The passage was so narrow that they had to go one at a time, Nathan's shoulders brushing against the cold stone as he followed Evelyn. The air inside was cool, in contrast to the scorching heat outside, but it carried a heavy feeling, as if the place held secrets that did not want to be revealed. After a few minutes, the passage widened into a large cave, with crudely carved stone walls, as if someone had tried to create a living space underground. In the center of the cave was a stone table, on which sat an old wooden chest, locked with a rusted iron padlock. Evelyn set the lantern down, and the light fell on her face, highlighting her sharp features. "This is where Ezra keeps his secrets," she said. "And now it is yours." Nathan stepped forward, feeling his heart pounding harder. "What secret?" he asked, his voice echoing in the cave. "You keep talking about secrets, but no one will tell you. I need to know the truth." "Oh." Nora stepped forward, opening the trunk with a small key she took from her pocket. Inside were a series of documents, maps, and a worn leather-bound notebook. She took the notebook out, opening it in front of Nathan. "This is Ezra's journal," she said. "He wrote everything down about Slade, about what he found, and about us." Nathan flipped through the pages, Ezra's handwriting clear but shaky, as if he had written in haste or fear. The pages told of how Ezra had worked for Slade, helping him manage copper mines in southern Arizona. But then Ezra learned the truth. Slade had not only mined copper, but had also used the mines to conceal an illegal operation smuggling gold from Mexico, using forced women as fronts to transport the goods across the border. "My uncle knows about this?" Nathan asked, his voice shaking with surprise. "And what did he do?" Isabel spoke up, her voice cold but sharp. "He tried to stop Slade. He helped us escape, brought us here, and started collecting evidence. But Slade found out. He didn't die of illness, Nathan. He was poisoned." Nathan felt the ground fall away from him. "Poison?" he repeated, his voice hoarse. "Are you saying Slade killed my uncle?" Evelyn nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "We don't have direct evidence, but Ezra wrote in his journal that he suspected Slade had someone following him. He knew he was in danger, but he kept going, for us and for you." And Nathan shook his head, trying to process the information. Uncle Ezra, who he had thought was just an eccentric old man, turned out to be a hero, someone who had sacrificed everything to protect these women. But why hadn't he told him anything? Why had he been brought into this story without any warning? Hannah spoke softly. "Ezra believes you will find the truth, Nathan. He said you have his heart, the heart of a man who will stand up for what is right, no matter the cost." Nathan looked around, feeling the eyes of the 5 women. They weren't just shelters. They had fought, they had survived, and now they were putting their trust in him. But before he could say anything, a sound came from the cave entrance, a scuffling of stones, as if someone were approaching. Lila drew her rifle, her eyes sharp. "We have guests," she whispered. Evelyn grabbed Nathan's hand and pulled him behind a large boulder. "If it's Slade's men," she said, her voice low but urgent, "we can't let them know about this place. Not now." Nathan nodded, his hand tightening on the pistol. He didn't know what awaited them, but he knew one thing for sure. He had chosen to stand with these women, and he would not turn his back, no matter what. Find out who's approaching the cave, and whether Nathan can protect Ezra's secret and these women from the approaching darkness. The cave was cold, but sweat beaded on Nathan's forehead as the sound of rocks scraping nearer the entrance. The light from Evelyn's lantern flickered, casting distorted shadows on the rugged stone walls, as if the cave itself were alive and watching them. Lila stood near the entrance, her rifle pressed to her shoulder, her eyes as sharp as a hunting wolf's. Isabel drew her dagger, moving silently to stand beside Lila, ready to strike. Hannah and Nora crouched behind a boulder, Nora still clutching Ezra's diary as if it were their last protection. "Don't move," Evelyn whispered, her hand still clasped tightly around Nathan's. Her warmth was the only thing keeping him calm in this tense moment. He wanted to ask who might know about this place, but Evelyn's eyes motioned for him to keep quiet. They waited, their breaths almost held, when a figure appeared at the entrance to the cave. It wasn't Slade's men, but a lone man in a worn leather jacket, a wide-brimmed hat that hid his face. He stepped in, his heavy boots clicking on the stone, and stopped when he saw the light from the lantern. "I know you're here," he said, his voice low and husky, with a familiarity that Nathan couldn't quite place. "Get out. I don't want to hurt anyone." Lila aimed her gun, her voice cold. "Say your name, or the next bullet will be more than a warning." "Oh." The man raised his hand slowly, as if not to provoke. "I'm Jacob Tanner," he said. "I work for Ezra Caldwell. He sent me here." Nathan felt Evelyn tighten her grip on his hand, but her eyes never left Tanner. Ezra died 5 years ago, she said, her voice sharp. You're lying. Tanner chuckled, a dry sound that echoed in the cave. I know he's dead. But before he died, he gave me a mission. To protect this place. And to protect you. I've been watching from afar, making sure Slade doesn't find this cave. But now that he knows where you are, I can't stand by. Nathan stepped out of hiding, ignoring Evelyn's warning look. If you work for my uncle, why have I never heard of you? He asked, his hand still on the gun. And why are you showing up now? Tanner looked at Nathan, his eyes sharp but not hostile. Because Ezra doesn't want you to get caught up in this, not when you're so young. He said you have a life of your own, and he wants to keep you safe. But when I saw you come to the house, I knew it was time to show myself. Isabel stepped forward, the knife in her hand glinting in the lantern light. You say you're protecting us, she said, her voice full of doubt. But how do we know you're not Slade's man? He has a habit of bribing anyone he wants. Tanner slowly pulled a silver ring from his pocket engraved with E.C. Ezra Caldwell's initials. Ezra gave this to me, he said. He said if you doubted it, show it to you. He said you would know. Nora stepped forward, took the ring, and examined it closely. Her face softened, and she nodded to Evelyn. It's true, she said. Ezra used to wear it. I remember it. The tension in the cave eased, but not entirely. Lila lowered her gun, but her eyes remained alert. All right, Tanner, she said. Let's say you're telling the truth. What do you know about Slade, and why are you here now? Tanner sat down on a rock, his eyes moving from one to the other. Slade doesn't just want you back, he said. He wants what Ezra hid here, what you're protecting. A cache of gold, hidden in the copper mine Slade controlled. Ezra discovered it, and he took it to stop Slade from using it for his illegal activities. Nathan felt his head spin. Gold? He asked, his voice filled with wonder. My uncle hid gold here? And Slade knew about it? Evelyn nodded, her eyes serious. That's why Slade never gave up. He thought the gold was his, and he would do anything to get it back, even kill us. Nathan looked at the wooden chest where Ezra's journal still lay open. He began to understand why his uncle had left him this house, not just an asset, but a responsibility. But he still couldn't understand why Ezra had chosen him, a bounty hunter with nothing but a gun and a dusty past. Tanner stood, his eyes urgent. We don't have much time, he said. Slade's been captured, but he's got men everywhere. I've heard a group of them are on their way, and they won't stop until they find this cave. Hannah, who had remained silent, spoke up in a trembling voice. What should we do? If they find this place, everything Ezra has done will be for nothing. Evelyn turned to Nathan, her eyes searching him. We need you, Nathan, she said, not just to protect this place, but to finish what Ezra started. Are you ready? Nathan felt his heart pounding harder. He was no hero, no one to risk his life for a cause. But when he looked into Evelyn's eyes, into Lila's determination, Hannah's tenderness, Isabel's calculation, and Nora's calm, he knew he couldn't turn away. I'm staying, he said, his voice firmer than he felt. Tell me what to do. Tanner nodded, as if he had passed some invisible test. Good, he said, because what's coming won't be easy. Slade isn't the only threat. There are others, people even Slade fears. Nathan felt a chill run through him. Others? He asked. What do you mean? But before Tanner could reply, an explosion rang out from the cave entrance, and smoke began to pour in. Someone had found them, and they weren't here to negotiate. Stay tuned to see how Nathan and the women will face new dangers, and what other secrets await in the shadows. Smoke and dust filled the cave, carrying with them the pungent smell of gunpowder. Nathan coughed, covering his mouth with his sleeve, his eyes stinging as he tried to see through the thick smoke. Screams echoed from the entrance, accompanied by heavy footsteps and the clanging of metal signs of armed men. Evelyn grabbed his arm and pulled him behind a large boulder, while Lila and Isabel moved like ghosts, taking up positions near the entrance. Hannah pressed close to Nora, her eyes filled with fear, but trying to keep her composure. We're under attack, Lila cried, her rifle ready. They found the cave. Nathan drew his pistol, his heart pounding. He didn't know who was coming, but the explosion had been no accident. Someone had deliberately forced their way in, and they weren't about to leave without getting their way. Jacob Tanner, the man who called himself Ezra's man, stood up, pulling a pistol from under his coat. "I warned you," he said, his voice strained. "Slade has people everywhere, and they're not stopping just because he's been caught." Evelyn turned to Nathan, her eyes sharp but confident. "We need to protect the chest," she said. "If they get it, everything Ezra sacrificed will be for nothing." Nathan nodded, though he still didn't fully understand the significance of the chest. Inside it were not only Ezra's journals, but also maps and documents evidence of Slade's smuggling operations, and perhaps the location of the gold Ezra had hidden. But why was it so important? And why were these people willing to kill to get it? Before he could ask, a figure emerged through the smoke, carrying a rifle. "Get out!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Hand over the trunk, or we'll blow this place down!" Lila fired a warning shot, the bullet whizzing past the man's head, sending him back. "Try again!" she yelled, her voice full of defiance. "I don't mind making your head a target!" But the attacker wasn't alone. More figures emerged, at least 5 or 6, all armed. Nathan realized they weren't ordinary hired guns. They moved with the precision of trained men, like mercenaries or veterans. It sent a shiver down his spine. Slade didn't just have money, he had an army. Tanner motioned Nathan and Evelyn toward the back of the cave. "There's a back exit," he whispered. "Ezra built it just in case. We need to get the chest out before they get in here." Nathan nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on Lila and Isabel, who were holding positions near the entrance. "We can't leave them behind," he said, his voice firm. Evelyn took his shoulder, her eyes both gentle and urgent. "They know what they're doing," she said. "Lila and Isabel can take care of themselves. But if we lose the chest, it's all over." Nathan hesitated, but finally nodded. He, Evelyn, Hannah, Nora, and Tanner moved quickly toward the back of the cave, where a narrow crevice in the rock led to another passage. Tanner led the way, his lantern illuminating the rugged stone walls. This passage was smaller, more claustrophobic, and Nathan felt as if the walls were closing in on him. But he had no time to panic. Gunfire continued to ring out behind him, accompanied by screams and the crunch of broken rocks. After a few minutes, they came to a smaller space where an old iron door was hidden behind a stone slab. Tanner pushed the slab aside, revealing the door. "This is the exit," he said, his voice strained. "It leads to another ravine, about a mile from the house. But we need to hurry." Nora, still clutching the trunk, looked at Tanner suspiciously. "How do we know you're not leading us into a trap?" she asked. "You showed up just in time, Tanner." Tanner paused, his eyes flashing with hurt. "I've spent 5 years protecting this secret," he said.
"Ezra was my friend. If I wanted to betray you, I would have done it long ago."
Evelyn put her hand on Nora's shoulder, her eyes softening. "We have to trust him," she said. For now, they pushed open the iron doors and stepped out into the cool desert air. The sun was high in the sky, burning everything with its glaring light. Nathan glanced back, worried about Lila and Isabel. But before he could say anything, Tanner motioned for them to move on. "We need to get the trunk somewhere safe," he said. "There's a place Ezra prepared a small bunker near the house. If we go there, we can keep the trunk safe until the marshals arrive." They rode back to the house, moving quickly through the winding paths. When they arrived, Nathan found the house quiet, no sign of Slade's men. But the silence made him uneasy. It was too perfect, like the calm before a storm. Tanner led them to a hidden corner at the back of the house, where a wooden board was hidden under a layer of dirt and hay. He pulled the board back, revealing a small cellar with earthen walls reinforced with wood. "This is where Ezra keeps his most important things," Tanner said. "The trunk will be safe here." Nora placed the chest in the cellar, but her eyes were still filled with worry. "Lila and Isabel," she said. "We need to go back and help them." Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I'll go," he said. "You stay here with Tanner. If anything happens, keep the trunk safe." Evelyn took his hand, her eyes filled with concern. "Nathan, you don't have to do this. This isn't your fight." But Nathan shook his head, feeling a certainty he had never felt before. "It has been my fight since I entered this house," he said. "I will not let Lila and Isabel fight this alone." He turned and rode toward the cave, his heart pounding with adrenaline and a new sense of purpose. As he neared the ravine, the gunfire continued, but fainter, as if the battle were drawing to a close. He hoped he wasn't too late. Let's see what Nathan will find in the cave, and whether he can save Lila and Isabel before it's too late. When Nathan reached the ravine, The smell of gunpowder and burning rock still hung in the air. He dismounted and moved cautiously toward the cave entrance, pistol clutched in his hand. The gunfire had ceased, but the silence was more disturbing than reassuring. It was like the silence of a battlefield after everything was over, though how, he wasn't sure. He stepped into the cave, the light from the sun outside barely enough to illuminate the first few steps. As he went deeper, he saw the signs of battle: broken stones, shell casings scattered on the ground, and a few bloodstains on the walls. His heart sank. Lila and Isabel, were they still alive? "Lila," he called, his voice echoing in the dark space. "Isabel, where are you?" A small noise came from behind a large boulder, and Nathan raised his gun, ready to fire. But then he saw Lila, her red hair disheveled, her face smeared with dust and blood, but her eyes burning with determination. She was supporting Isabel, who had a wound in her shoulder, blood seeping through her leather jacket. "They ran," Lila said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "3 of them. We took 2, but the rest fled at the sound of your hooves." Nathan ran over and helped Lila sit Isabel down. "How is she?" he asked, his eyes worried over the wound. Isabel winced, but her voice remained sharp. "I'm fine," she said. "It's just a flesh wound, but we need to get out of here. They'll be back, and they'll have more men with them this time." Nathan nodded, helping Lila carry Isabel out of the cave. When they emerged into the light, he saw that the redhead was trying to keep her face stoic, but her eyes flashed with gratitude as she looked at him. "Thanks for coming back," she said, her voice low. "I didn't think you would." Nathan smiled faintly. "I'm not sure I will either, until I actually do it." "Yeah." They rode back to the house, where Evelyn, Hannah, Nora, and Tanner were waiting. When Hannah saw Lila and Isabel alive, she burst into tears and ran to hug them. Evelyn looked at Nathan, her eyes full of emotion he couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to risk it," she said. "But I did," Nathan replied, his voice firm. "And I would do it again if necessary." Nora stepped forward, examining Isabel's wound. "We need to get her in and get this treated," she said. "But first, we need to talk about what happens next. Slade may be captured, but his men are still out there, and they know about the cave." Tanner nodded, his eyes serious. "They don't just want the chest," he said. "They want the gold. And if they find the vault, they won't stop until they get everything." Nathan looked around, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "So, what do we do now?" he asked. "We can't just hide." Evelyn stepped forward, her eyes bright with a plan. "We don't hide," she said. "We fight, but we need to do it smart. The marshals are on their way, but we need time. And we need you, Nathan." Nathan felt his heart pound. He was no hero, but the look in these women's eyes, the trust, the determination, the vulnerability they hid, made him want to be one. "Okay," he said. "Tell me what to do." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Nora and Hannah treated Isabel's wounds, while Lila and Tanner checked weapons and fortified the house. Evelyn led Nathan down to the cellar, where the chest was safely hidden. She opened it and pulled out an old map, marking a spot deep in the desert. "This is where Ezra hid the gold," she said. "If we can get it to the marshals before Slade's men find it, we can end this." Nathan looked at the map, feeling a rush of adrenaline run through him. "Then let's go get it," he said. "But we need to be quick." Evelyn nodded, but her eyes were worried. "There is a problem," she said. "This place is not easy to find, and not easy to get into. Ezra has set traps to protect it, and if we fail, we will lose everything." Nathan took her hand, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. "We will not fail," he said, his voice more certain than he felt. "Not while we have each other." Let's see how Nathan and these women will face the final challenge, and whether they can protect Ezra's treasure before it's too late. Night fell over the desert, a chill that contrasted sharply with the heat of the day. Nathan stood outside the house, staring up at the starry sky, feeling as if the universe were watching them. Ezra's map lay in his hand, the lines faded but clear, leading to an abandoned quarry a few miles away. That was where Ezra had hidden the gold, the treasure Slade and his men were willing to kill for. Evelyn stood beside him, the moonlight illuminating her face, highlighting her gray eyes as if they contained the desert. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low but full of emotion. "This isn't just about gold, Nathan. This is about what Ezra stood for: justice, freedom, and a chance for us to start over." Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I'm sure," he said, "my uncle left this place to me, not to sell it, but to finish what he started. I won't let him down. Or you." Lila, Isabel, Hannah, Nora, and Tanner joined them, each armed and with a quiet resolve. Isabel, still weak from her wounds, insisted on coming along. "I'm not sitting on the sidelines," she said, her eyes sharp. "If Slade wants the gold, he'll have to go through me." They rode in the moonlight, moving quickly through the winding trails. The quarry, according to the map, was located deep in a narrow canyon where towering rock walls blocked out the light. As they got closer, Nathan realized why Ezra had chosen this place. It was almost inaccessible, with narrow paths and jagged rocks that could collapse at any moment. Tanner took the lead, using a torch to light the way. "Ezra has set traps here," he said. "Loose slabs, hidden ropes, and even a few explosive charges. We need to be careful." They moved slowly, avoiding the traps Ezra had set up to protect the treasure. After an hour, they came to a small cave, hidden behind a large stone slab. Tanner pushed the slab aside, revealing a dark space with a large iron chest in the middle. Nathan stepped forward, his heart pounding. "This is it?" he asked, his voice echoing in the cave. Evelyn nodded, pulling a key from her pocket. "Ezra gave it to me," she said. "He said if this day ever came, I would know what to do." She opened the chest, revealing gold bars that glittered in the torchlight. There were dozens of them, enough to drive anyone insane with greed. But Nathan felt no interest in wealth. He felt only responsibility, the responsibility to protect what Ezra had died to keep safe. "We need to get this out," Nora said, her voice urgent. "The federal marshals are coming tomorrow morning. If we give them this gold, Slade and his network will collapse." But before they could move the chest, an explosion rang out from the entrance to the canyon. Smoke and dust filled the air, and the shouts of a group of men rang out. "Found them!" a voice cried. "Take the gold." Nathan drew his gun, his heart pounding. Slade's men had found them, and this time, they weren't here to negotiate. Lila and Isabel took up positions near the entrance, while Tanner and Nora moved the chest to the back of the cave. Hannah, though frightened, stood next to Evelyn, ready to fight. The fight was quick and fierce. Slade's gunmen, about 8 of them, charged into the canyon, firing into the cave. Nathan returned fire, taking one down before ducking behind a rock. Lila and Isabel fought like warriors, but they were outnumbered. In the chaos, Nathan recognized a familiar figure, not Slade, but another man, tall, with silver hair and cold eyes. "That's Colton Hayes," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "The man behind Slade. He's the one who really controls everything." Nathan felt his blood run cold. If Hayes was behind Slade, then this war was bigger than he thought. But there was no time to panic. He turned to Evelyn, his eyes steady. "We have to get the gold out," he said, "no matter what." They fought, moving the chest through the canyon as bullets whizzed around them. Tanner led the way, triggering one of Ezra's traps, a series of rock slides that collapsed, blocking the attacker's path. But Hayes and a few others followed, refusing to give up. Finally, they reached the house, where the federal marshal was waiting. Nathan handed them the trunk, along with Ezra's journal and documents. Hayes, realizing he had lost, fled into the desert, but not before throwing back a threat. "This isn't the end, Caldwell," he roared. "I'll be back." Let's see what happens when Nathan and these women face the final chapter of the story, and whether they can find peace after all. 3 months later, Nathan stood on the porch of the wooden house, looking out over what had become a thriving small farm. The women, Evelyn, Lila, Hannah, Isabel, and Nora, had turned the place into a home. The fields were now green with grass, thanks to an irrigation system Nora had designed. The stables had been expanded, and Lila had begun training horses to sell to neighboring farms. Hannah and Isabel tended the garden, providing food not only for themselves but also for the nearby towns. And Evelyn, with her wit and charm, had become the unofficial leader, negotiating with merchants and ensuring that their farm thrived. The federal marshals used evidence from Ezra's trunk to bring down Slade's network. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and Colton Hayes, though still on the run, lost much of his power. Slade's wife, Margaret, took back her father's mining rights and used them to help other women trapped in similar situations. Nathan looked at Evelyn, who was standing by the fence, her eyes on the horizon. He stepped forward, feeling his heart beat faster as she turned and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice soft. "About my uncle," Nathan said, "and about what he left behind. Not just this house, but you and the chance to do the right thing." Evelyn took his hand, her fingers naturally intertwining with his. "You did it, Nathan," she said. "You protected us, and you protected Ezra's legacy." Nathan looked out at the farm, where Lila was training a horse. Hannah and Isabel were laughing in the garden, and Nora was doing some bookkeeping. "I think we protected each other," he said. "And maybe that's what my uncle wanted." As the sun sets behind the mountains, Nathan realizes that Ezra's true legacy is not the gold, not the land, but the people who found each other in this desert, and their strength when they stand together. He is no longer a wandering bounty hunter. He is part of a family, a purpose, and a story that will be told for generations. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories where courage and fate collide in unexpected ways. Thanks for being here, and don't forget to leave a super chat to encourage us to continue bringing stories like this.